This week's question was, is it moral for Christians to see rated R movies, to watch rated R movies? Now, what it means to be rated R is, the rating system that we have, at least in this country, comes from the Motion Picture Association of America. And what it means for a movie to be rated R is that it has material that is not suitable for children under the age of 17. So nudity, violence, language, etc. Now, this is a really good question, and I think it actually applies to more than just movies. In fact, sometimes books or music or other media such as that is sometimes more dangerous than movies because we don't really have a clear rating system like we do for movies. You see a movie's rated R and you know there's going to be some questionable content in it. But you don't always know that for things like books. Generally, you see somebody reading, you're like, oh, they're reading, it must be something pleasant. And then sometimes books have very troubling content in them as well. To start out talking about this, I wanted to kind of back up at first because the rating system that we have here by the Motion Picture Association of America, I think, is great. The purpose of the rating system is to make sure that you don't have children who are too young being exposed to themes or to content in movies that is beyond their age level. And that's a great thing that we have, and I think the Motion Picture Association of America does a great job of classifying movies. But as Christians, we look for things sort of beyond just the content of the movie. And so to start out, I just talking about what a movie is or what a book is or music or really anything, because I think what we're talking about goes beyond movies. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, which we used in my class, paragraph 2501 talks about art, and art including movies or books or whatever. Art is created by people, by us, and we are using talents that are given to us by God. That's what the paragraph says. And in addition, the purpose of truth is to give, the purpose of art is to give form to the truth, of reality in a language accessible to sight or to hearing or whatever. To the extent that it is inspired by truth and love of beings, art bears a certain likeness to God's activity in what he has created. Essentially, art is a great thing. The Catechism goes on to say that art in itself is not an end. So, it's not. Seeing movies is not a necessity, in other words, but it is also a great thing, and it can give form to truth, and it can bear a likeness to God. The creation of movies, these are directors, very talented directors we have that create these movies. But sometimes, as with any talent, a talent can be misused. A talent given to us by God can be misused in a way that can be inappropriate, and that's where we get our rating system. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about some flaws with our rating system, but in general, I will say this: the rating system that we have is excellent for children. For people who are under 17, I would always say if you're under 17, you should not be seeing a rated R movie, just because those rating systems are very good. There's content in those movies that I think children should not be exposed to. Now, having said that, as Christians, and specifically as Catholics, we look for things beyond just the content or just the language. We always want to avoid content in movies that can be seen to be gratuitous. And what gratuitous means is that it's excessive and that the content goes beyond what is necessary to tell the story. So, for instance, taking for an example violence. Gratuitous violence means you have violence in the movie that is not necessary to the story, that is just over the top, excessively bloody, and is putting images in your head that you really don't need to be there. And that's kind of what the rating system is about, and how morality plays into movies, because movies are an art form, but they also tell stories, and they put images and ideas in your head that, as responsible Christian adults, we should be aware of. You have to remember that the devil is trying to look for little ways to enter into our lives, and by putting these images in our head unnecessarily, that's providing an opportunity for the devil to enter into our lives. So that's why we want to avoid seeing movies that have gratuitous content like violence. Now, using the same example of violence, there are movies that are rated R solely for violence that, as Catholics, I think not only would it be permissible for us to see these movies, but it can even be good for us to see these movies. For example, the best example I can think of is The Passion of the Christ. It has violence in it that the Motion Picture Association of America might label as gratuitous. There's persistent violence. There's violence throughout. The Passion is rated R, but I would say it is a great story. It is the Passion of the Christ. It's told well. The violence is excessive, but it is also true to what happened in the story. And I think seeing the Passion and seeing those images are great for us to visualize what actually happened and to see how Christ's sacrifice, what his sacrifice actually was. Because we have a tendency to, I think, romanticize these old stories from the Gospels of Christ and of the apostles and early martyrs, how they died. We tend to kind of make it a little bit fluffy when we depict it in art. And I think the Passion is a great depiction in art of the Passion. So that's one example. Now, the other side of that coin are films that are not rated R, that do not contain content that is inappropriate for children. So there's low violence, low language. They're really children's movies. However, they do contain themes that as Catholics and as Christians we should avoid exposing ourselves to. For instance, the only example I can really think of right now is the Golden Compass, which is a movie that has explicitly anti-religious themes in it. The author of the book admits to it. He's proud of the fact that he's anti-religious. And so the Golden Compass has these themes that we should really not be exposing ourselves to. However, the book and the movie is targeted, it targets children. So there's no really inappropriate or gratuitous content, but the themes in it we would avoid. So what I'm getting at is that although I think the MPAA rating system is really good at targeting content, it does overlook themes. Sometimes a movie will be rated R that can be fine to see, and sometimes a movie will be rated PG that may be really inappropriate. So how do we know what movies to see? Because just because a movie's rated R doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Just because a movie is rated PG does not necessarily mean that it's good. As Christians and as Catholics, the way we would decide what movies are appropriate for us to see would be by the use of our conscience, which the Catechism tells us in 1778 is the conscience is a judgment of reason. We're using the knowledge that's available to us to make an informed decision. And one website that I will recommend to you, and that I'm going to include in the information section of this video, is the Catholic News Service website. It is catholicnews.com, and one thing they are great for are movie reviews. From the homepage, and I'll include a link to this, there's a section called Movie Reviews, and as new movies come out, they review the movies and they give them their own rating, which when I first started looking at this, their ratings are a little bit confusing because they have their own rating system. But what's great about catholicnews.com is that they don't just rate the movie, they also tell you specifically why the movie received this rating. So they will list, they will not just say there is profanity, but they will explain what types of profanity or languages in the movie. They talk about the violence, they talk about everything, and they're looking at it from a Catholic perspective. So just because a movie is rated R, the Catholic News Service won't necessarily say it's rated R, don't see it. They'll say this is what's in it, and they will make their own informed decision whether it's good and they would recommend it, whether it's bad, and they'll have recommendations about whether children should see it or just adults. Also keep in mind that when in doubt, if you've looked up things about the movie and you're still not sure, when in doubt, movies are never necessary. There's never going to be a movie that I would say, even The Passion of the Christ, there's never going to be a movie that I'll say, you have to see this. It's, you're morally obligated to see this. Because remember, the Catechism says in 2501, art is not an end in itself. It is not necessary. It is something that can give form to truth, but it is never something that is necessary for you to expose yourself to. So, overcome your vincible ignorance, make informed decisions, but don't necessarily let the ratings of movies turn you away from seeing something that could be a decent film. As always, you can submit your questions on frogquestions.com, and you can subscribe to this video series by clicking on the frog. Thank you for watching.